It's just a cold. You'll be fine if you sleep it off. I couldn't believe what my husband had just said. Despite my high fever, he was planning to leave me and our young daughter to attend a friend's wedding overseas. Off he went, genuinely excited about his trip, unaware of the surprising twists awaiting him. My name is Allison. I'm a 35-year-old stay-at-home mom, living with my husband David and our 5-year-old daughter Misty. Misty adores picture books and is a sweet, kind-hearted girl who fills our home with laughter. She is my pride and joy. David is a social butterfly, well-versed in various hobbies and always full of entertaining stories. He was the man I was proud to marry, and I believed that our union would bring eternal happiness. In the beginning, our married life was blissful. We enjoyed a sweet newlywed phase and were blessed with a child fairly quickly. At David's request, I quit my job when I got pregnant. The pregnancy was smooth, and I gave birth to Misty without any complications. That's when everything changed. After the birth, David underwent a drastic transformation. He started criticizing me relentlessly, calling me fat because I struggled to shed the baby weight. "You're not attractive anymore," he'd say. Make an effort to lose some weight. While grappling with the challenges of first-time parenting, I was also chastised for not keeping up with household chores. Despite my pleas for assistance, David's response was harsh. "Don't be lazy. You eat but can't even handle chores or childcare." Unbelievable. It became evident that David resented the time household responsibilities and childcare demanded of him. I was taken aback by this selfish side of him, especially considering how excited he had been about the pregnancy. Whenever I mustered the courage to ask for help, David would complain to neighbors and relatives, portraying me as negligent and incompetent, which left me feeling humiliated and afraid to confront him. However, the most significant problem was money. Before Misty arrived, we both contributed to a joint account and spent the rest as we pleased. Once she was born, David took charge of finances since I no longer had an income. Unfortunately, he provided very little for our living expenses. On one occasion, he insisted I manage with just $300 for all three of us. This caused me immense stress, affecting my ability to produce enough breast milk, forcing us to rely on formula. Between formula and diapers alone, $300 was woefully inadequate. Desperate to save money, I started cooking budget meals, but David's response was anything but supportive. He would angrily criticize the food, saying, "Don't serve me this cheap-smelling food." When I suggested finding a job to contribute financially, he belittled me, claiming, "You can't handle housework, let alone a job and raising a child. You're just planning to slack off and make me do everything. Manage with the money I give you." David vehemently opposed the idea of me working, perhaps fearing it would increase his household responsibilities. Now that Misty is 5 years old, David seems to have lost interest in her. He often ignores her attempts to engage with him, opting instead to immerse himself in his phone. I had believed that marrying David would create a happy family, but I was mistaken. Witnessing Misty's disappointment as David ignores her and refuses to play with her breaks my heart. Then, one day, I discovered that David had used the money we had saved for Misty's education. As I am not working, I worry that we are barely scraping by each month. David is responsible for managing our finances, yet he refuses to disclose our savings or expenditures. I suspect we may not be saving at all and could be running a deficit each month, prompting him to dip into the education fund. When I confronted David about it, he adamantly refused to explain how he had spent the money. Finally, he snapped, "I earned this money. How I spend it is my business. You and Misty eat because of me, so stop complaining." Despite my repeated attempts to discuss the matter, David remained obstinate, and our conversations led nowhere. Then David dropped a bombshell. A friend invited me to their wedding overseas. I was stunned. Even if his friends covered some travel expenses, going abroad would still be a significant financial strain. We were already struggling to afford Misty's education, so how could we possibly afford an overseas trip? I tried to discuss this with David, but he brushed off my concerns and began making arrangements for the trip. Divorce crossed my mind briefly, but the thought of Misty having only one father held me back. I couldn't bear to take that away from her. The day before David was set to leave, I was hit with a high fever. It had been years since I last had a fever, and this was the first time as an adult. I was plagued by headaches, nausea, dizziness, and body aches that clouded my senses. "Could you please consider skipping the wedding? I'm really struggling with this fever," I asked weakly. David chuckled dismissively, saying, You'll be fine if you sleep it off. His tone carried an edge of impatience as he added, stop being so needy. Handle it yourself. You can't even manage yourself, and you're not even working. Desperate, I pleaded, could you at least get some food for Misty? She hasn't eaten properly since yesterday. Exhaling heavily, David replied, I don't have time for that, and I don't want to catch anything. I'm staying in the hotel tonight. With that, he left us behind to attend the overseas wedding. At that moment, suffering from a high fever, I had made a decision. For Misty's sake, I knew I had to let go of someone as selfish as David. 5 days later, David returned home in high spirits. I'm back. Why are Mom and Dad here? David's parents were sitting in the living room. They remained silent. What's going on? Where's Allison? It was Misty who answered David's question. Mom is in heaven now. What? What are you talking about? David, thinking Misty was joking, burst into laughter. His parents shook their heads in disbelief. You've made a terrible mistake. It's too late now, his father finally said. David looked bewildered, struggling to understand the weight of their words. Did Allison really die from that high fever? David muttered to himself as he watched his parents leave the house with Misty. She waved at him, but as usual, he ignored her. His parents got into the car and drove away. That was the plan. My parents and I were quietly waiting in the kids' room. I had my phone connected to my in-laws and was monitoring the living room through a hidden camera on my computer. Nearby, my sister stood ready to pick up Misty, shielding her from hearing things she shouldn't. Only my in-laws remained in the car. During David's time overseas, I had informed both sets of parents about his appalling behavior. I had been contemplating divorce, but I knew he would resist paying alimony or child support. Thus, I sought their support in revealing the truth for the divorce proceedings. I had told Missy she might not see David again, and when she expressed a desire to say goodbye, I arranged for my in-laws to be present in the living room. Remarkably, Misty didn't protest the possibility of not seeing her father again. Even at her young age, she seemed to understand that her father wasn't treating her well. From now on, I would have to focus on Misty's well-being above all else. I wondered how David would react to Misty's words, Mom is in heaven. Would he show remorse for his actions or apologize tearfully? I watched in silence through the hidden camera, hoping for some sign of regret. Instead, David did something unexpected. He made a phone call, his voice filled with elation. Brianna, I don't have all the details yet, but it looks like my wife is gone. Finally, the obstacle is out of the way. I should get the insurance money soon. Let the old folks take care of Misty. Let's be together. You're the only one I love, Brianna. At that moment, we realized David had been having an affair all along, and he saw me and our child as obstacles to his plans. He intended to use the insurance money to marry this other woman. My parents, who were watching the footage with me, shared my fury. Meanwhile, my in-laws, who were on the phone with us, had also heard David's call and were equally incensed. I signaled to both sets of parents, and together we stormed into the living room where David stood, shocked to see us. Wait, Allison, but I thought you were in heaven, he stammered, trying to explain himself. I couldn't hold back my laughter at David's ignorance. Heaven is what Misty calls her room. It's filled with sky blue sheets and white pillows. You wouldn't know because you never bother talking to her. Wait, really? I thought. Well, never mind. David stumbled, unaware that we had overheard his phone call and trying to backtrack, but it was futile. Enough with the excuses. We've been watching you on a hidden camera. You abandoned your sick family to attend a wedding, and you've been having an affair. I confronted him firmly. No, it's not like that. I haven't. David attempted to defend himself, but I cut him off. No more lies. The decision is made. We're getting a divorce, and I'll be pursuing alimony and child support, so get ready, I declared. My father-in-law erupted in anger, his face flushed. If you go through with this, don't ever show your face here again. You're no longer our son, he shouted vehemently. Immediately following that, David's cell phone rang, filling the room with his distinctive ringtone. David made no move to answer, so I picked up his phone to see who it was. The caller was Brianna, David's mistress. Without hesitation, I answered the call and put it on speaker so everyone present could hear. Hello? What was that about earlier? Living together was just a joke, right? I have a fiancé, so stop deluding yourself. I can't be with someone so clueless. Don't contact me again. Brianna's voice rang through the room before she hung up abruptly. David, now rejected by his mistress as well, went pale and fell to his knees, pleading for forgiveness. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. If my family disowns me, you're the only one I have left. And I can't afford to pay alimony or anything like that. I've already spent so much on Brianna during this trip. David started rambling unprompted, as if attempting to explain himself. I gave him a stern glare. So you didn't attend a wedding. You left your family behind for a romantic getaway. Well, David faltered, unable to find words to justify his actions. I couldn't believe he would abandon us and incriminate himself by admitting to an affair. I questioned why I had ever married such a fool. I should have divorced him much earlier. Watching David stumble over his words, I resolved to focus on moving forward with my life, just Misty and me. Later, I checked David's phone and discovered numerous photos and videos from his trip with his mistress. It was evident that his story about attending a friend's wedding was a complete fabrication. Armed with this evidence, I consulted a lawyer and initiated divorce proceedings, seeking rightful compensation and child support. The lawyer conducted an investigation, including a visit to Brianna, who supposedly worked at a nightclub. During the inquiry, Brianna claimed she was merely entertaining an older man as part of her job, but David stubbornly insisted they were in love, causing a significant uproar. It became undeniable that David had been financially supporting Brianna, which explained why he had been stingy with her living expenses and even dipped into Misty's college fund. David's life spiraled into misery, burdened by debts from his extravagant spending and the financial fallout of our divorce. His troubles compounded when news of his affair and lavish trips surfaced at his workplace, leading to a loss of respect and standing among his colleagues. Ironically, the nightclub where Brianna worked turned out to be a popular haunt for David's coworkers, leading to a dramatic confrontation between them. Some of David's colleagues witnessed the scene, spreading gossip throughout the company about his indiscretions. It seemed David confronted Brianna unaware that she was engaged, adding to the spectacle. It was pathetic how easily he let himself be manipulated by a young woman. This incident isolated David at work, further cementing his downward spiral. I later heard he was demoted and faced a significant salary reduction. My lawyer, who kept me informed throughout, also updated me on Brianna's unfortunate turn of events. Her fiancé, a regular patron at the club, discovered her affair with David and promptly called off their engagement. He even demanded compensation for the wedding expenses they had already incurred. Struggling to meet this hefty demand, Brianna resorted to deceitful tactics with other club patrons, which inevitably came to light. Consequently, she was fired from her job. Now, Brianna juggles multiple part-time jobs to repay her debts, living alone in a modest apartment. As for me, I've moved back home and am now living with my parents and Misty. It's a relief to be away from the neighbors who believe David's rumors and lies about me. Life is much calmer now. My parents adore Misty, and she seems happier than she was when she lived with David. David has come to my parents' house a few times, pleading for another chance, but my dad has firmly turned him away. Neither Misty nor I have any desire to see him. If Misty expresses a wish to see her father in the future, I'll consider it, but for now, she has no interest in meeting him. I have no intention of reconciling with David, so I see no reason to engage with him. If his persistence becomes too much, I'm prepared to involve the police. Reflecting on where David and his mistress Brianna are now, I see how destructive affairs can be. They've lost everything and are now living a much more difficult life. It's entirely their own doing. From now on, my focus is on cherishing the happiness I have with my parents and Misty, and leaving David in the past.